The following program from Gilbert Highετ's Literature and Great Writers series is brought to you by Jeffrey Norton Publishers. All rights are reserved.
The United States of America was not born out of a vacuum. It was created by ideals which already existed, which had existed for many centuries. Yet the founders of the Republic believed that these ideals had long been forgotten. They thought it was a daring and incredibly difficult task to convert these ideals once more into fact, and to work out their application and their consequences. Sometimes they almost despaired and felt the enterprise was doomed. In the beginning they failed, and they had to revise their plans and reshape them more accurately and realistically before the present structure of the United States could be put on a working basis. They succeeded, those intelligent idealists, those practical dreamers. The United States works. It works so well that our neighbors abroad occasionally fail to give us credit for carrying out a plan far bolder than any other in modern history. Now and then they call us crude materialists, forgetting that the very pattern of our life is made out of ideals, which are still working their way into reality. The principles on which the Republic is founded are many and powerful. It would take months to discuss them all and show how they are ingrained in our laws, in our attitudes to religion, in the shape of our society, in habits so familiar that we seldom think of them, and in institutions so important that we scarcely question them. But one group of these principles deserves special attention because it's least known and among the most important. This is the group of ideals drawn from ancient Greece and ancient Rome. Take out a dollar bill and look at it. On one side you will see the face of Washington, the father of our country. On the other there are two circles. These are reproductions of the Great Seal of the United States. They carry three short phrases in Latin. All of these are adapted from the poetry of Virgil, or from poems attributed to him. This is because the founding fathers believed that Virgil was not only one of the greatest poets who ever lived, but something like a seer who understood the hidden forces which build or destroy civilization. On the left of the dollar bill, the circle shows a pyramid, which I imagine is Masonic in origin. Above are the words Annuit Coeptis, he has approved of our enterprise. They are set around an eye within a halo, which is surely a symbol of God. Therefore they mean that God himself has approved of the foundation of the Republic. The pyramid bears in Roman numerals the date 1776. Beneath the pyramid is the phrase Novus Ordo Seclorum, which means a new order of the ages, a new beginning of history. This is adapted from the wonderful fourth bucolic poem of Virgil, in which he foretells the opening of a new age of the world, with the birth of a miraculous child, who shall bring in the reign of peace and re-establish the virtue which our first forefathers knew. A poem which, although it was written 40 years before the birth of Jesus, seemed to the early Christians like a clear prophecy of the coming of the Messiah. This motto also shows how the founders of the United States felt that they were doing a work which was qualitatively unlike anything then in existence, and was partly divine in origin. On the right-hand side of the dollar bill, the Great Seal shows the well-known figure of the eagle, with the thunderbolts of war grasped in its left claw, and the olives of peace in its right. Both olive branches and thunderbolts are Greco-Roman symbols, and so, originally, is the eagle itself. Ben Franklin didn't like it. He proposed that the national bird of America should be the turkey, but he was overruled, and perhaps he wasn't wholly serious. In its beak, the eagle bears a scroll with the words E pluribus unum, one out of many, a quotation from the Moretum, then believed to be Virgil's, which is a succinct description of the several states joined in a single union. Finally, look at a dime. There are several different designs of dimes, but one of the best known bears on one side the head of a Greek divinity with a winged helmet, and on the other the Roman fasces. Although they were abused by Mussolini and his bully boys, the fasces are a truly democratic emblem. They are, you know, a bundle of rods with an axe in their center. They symbolize the rule of law over all the people in a democracy, all the people, including those in power. The rods show that a guilty citizen can be beaten, and the axe that he can be put to death, but only by a magistrate and only after due process of law. This was a central symbol of the free Republic of Rome in the days before it was taken over by the dictators who were called emperors. You may think that these are trifles, and rather old-fashioned trifles at that. If you do, you'll be mistaken. They are meaningful symbols, and symbols which are preserved for many centuries show a deep underlying resolution and bear witness to a set of enduring ideals. Not all, but some of the ideals which inspired the founding fathers were the ideals of Greece and Rome. When they set up the new republic, they modelled it partly on the free Greek and Roman states. That, for instance, is why the upper chamber of Congress is called the Senate. The word means the assembly of elders and is borrowed directly from the Roman legislative body. That's why the Congress building is set upon a hill called the Capitol, after the hill in the city of Rome where the records of the republic were stored. Great ideas such as these do not age and are not rendered obsolete by any material progress. They may be forgotten from time to time in the temporary insanities which beset mankind, but they re-emerge after long intervals to create mighty states and beneficial institutions. Recently I've been reading a book on this entire subject. It's a selection from the most important books which the founding fathers themselves read with particular attention. Therefore, it is a partial mirror of the ideas which went through their minds during one of the most vital formative periods in history. It's called Our Long Heritage. It's edited by Wilson Clough, C-L-O-U-G-H, and it's published by the University of Minnesota Press. Only one section of this anthology is filled with selections from the Greek and Roman books which the American statesmen knew, yet it's possible to read the entire work, and all through it, in the utterances of Burke and Rousseau and the wise Montesquieu, to trace the classical tradition of logic and the sense of history and respect for man simply as man. The founding fathers did not think that all the Greek and Roman thinkers were equally valuable or equally important to them. Plato, for example, they scarcely read. Both Adams and Jefferson spoke slightingly of Plato because he distrusted and despised democracy, hoping for that delectable impossibility, a government of philosophers or an educated aristocracy. They thought much more of the historian Thucydides, that calm realist who had seen the disintegration of his own country through war and revolution. John Adams, who was to become the second President of the United States, quoted Thucydides' description of the ravages of class war in his defense of the Constitution of the United States, as a warning to all those who might believe that perjury and treachery could solve the problems of their country. Here is a selection from that splendid analysis of a constantly recurring disease. Even through the thick velvet curtain of baroque prose, it gives a vivid picture of the cruelties and treacheries involved in class war. Oaths, if ever made for temporary reconciliation, had a temporary force, so long as neither knew how to break them, but never when either party had power to abet their violation. He who, at inviting opportunity, durst incur the perjury, if the adversary was off his guard, executed his rancour with higher spirit than from enmity open and avowed. Such a step was thought most secure, and, because he had thus surpassed in guile, it was certainly extolled as a masterpiece of cunning. Large is the number of villains, and such obtain more easily the reputation of dexterity than their dupes can of goodness. The latter are apt to blush, the former most impudently triumph. The source of all these evils is a thirst for power, in consequence either of rapacious or ambitious passions. Seditions in this manner introduced every species of outrageous wickedness into the Grecian manners. Sincerity, which is most frequently to be found in generous tempers, was laughed out of countenance and forever vanished. It was become the universal practice to keep up a constant enmity of intention against one another and never to believe. No promise was strong enough, no oath sufficiently solemn to banish such mutual diffidence. Those who excelled in shrewd consideration resigned all hope of any lasting security and stood ever on their guard, against whom it was impossible for them to trust. This horrible account, the best which has ever been written in so small a space, was quite clearly in the minds of several of the men who created our republic. They took instruction from it, and they did what they could to warn their contemporaries and successors against the dangers it describes. But also they were deeply interested in a more stable state than the states of Greece, the Roman Republic. They studied it to find out how it had lasted for so many long and difficult centuries, in order that they also might build a country which would last. And they found a guide in the Greek philosopher Polybius. This man, instead of despising Rome, as many Greeks used to do, came to admire its strength and its wisdom and its stability. He concluded that these virtues were based not on any concentration of power, but on a mixture of powers, in which any excess was checked and any defect was counterbalanced. The Founding Fathers determined to take over this principle of checks and balances, and so what the Romans did almost instinctively, and what a Greek philosopher diagnosed and explained, the first Americans put into practice in constructing the three bodies, legislative, executive, and judiciary, through which the American people governs itself. Mr. Clough's book is full of problems, some of which go very deep into American life and thought. One of these is the famous phrase in the Declaration of Independence that among the rights given to men by God are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's a strange phrase, isn't it? Life, yes, certainly. Liberty, most surely. But can the pursuit of happiness be called a right? And is it the only right except life and liberty which ought to be mentioned in such a document? Who coined the phrase, and what did he mean? The phrase was written by Mr. Jefferson. It was not an empty phrase either. It seems clear that he coined it as an alternative to two or three other possibilities. Men who were more orthodox in their religious views would surely have said something like the pursuit of virtue or the service of God, rather than the pursuit of happiness. Mr. Jefferson rejected these ideas because he wished to preserve complete religious freedom for his new country. On the other hand, he also rejected the formula of the English political philosopher John Locke, who had named, among the most important of man's rights, property. Jefferson wanted something less material than property and more free than any single religion. Towards the end of his life, he described himself as an Epicurean, and he inserted in one of the fundamental documents of our country a phrase which can be traced to Greek philosophy. The fundamental theme of the philosophical system of Epicurus is not virtue, certainly not religion, not duty. All of these Epicurus thought artificial. And not pleasure. That's the mistake which primitive minds have often made. But the pursuit of happiness. The Republic was founded in 1776. Yes, but its spiritual ancestry goes back for many centuries beyond that date. No great institution was ever built without long and penetrating thought, without the slow forging and the repeated testing of certain central principles. One of the reasons why the United States has survived and grown stronger in a world full of danger and turmoil is that it was in part based upon the clear, penetrating thought of the Greeks and upon the shrewd and realistic statesmanship of the Romans. They are among the wisest of our spiritual ancestors.
This completes this program from the Gilbert Highet series. Fast forward the tape to the end. On side 2 is another talk by Mr. Highet.